Have you ever felt that specific, sudden terror when the world goes silent and the light vanishes? It's a fear that is primal and absolute, a sudden void where comfort used to be. That is the moment we are talking about today, the moment when we discover what truly illuminates our lives when the bulbs burn out. Our story belongs to Sarah, a kind-eyed woman of 30, and her daughter, Lily, a spirited little 6-year-old with a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. Their evenings followed a sacred, predictable routine. After the splash of the bath and the scent of lavender lotion, Lily would be tucked into her twin bed, nestled beneath a patchwork quilt that Sarah's grandmother had sewn years ago. The central act of this ritual, the anchor of their night, was the bedtime story. Every night, Sarah would read from the big, worn book of fairy tales, her voice dropping into the deep, mysterious tones for the wicked witches, and rising high and melodic for the valiant heroes. But the true star of the bedroom was not the book itself. It was the soft, mushroom-shaped nightlight resting on the bedside table. Lily called it Barnaby. Barnaby cast a honey-yellow glow that gently pushed back the shadows, guaranteeing that the monsters residing under the bed, or perhaps more accurately, the fear residing in Lily's small heart, stayed safely out of sight. Lily, like many children, had a profound and unwavering fear of the dark. For her, darkness was not merely the absence of light, it was an active, consuming entity. If Barnaby was on, the room was safe. If Barnaby was off, the room was full of possibilities she didn't want to contemplate. On this particular evening, Sarah was midway through the tale of a particularly stubborn princess who refused to eat her peas. Lily was giggling, resting her head on the pillow, her eyes half closed. The air was warm, heavy with the security of routine, and Sarah's voice was the steady rhythm guiding them toward sleep. Outside, the evening was growing stormy. The wind began to moan softly around the eaves, a low, unsettling sound, and a sudden, sharp crack of thunder rattled the window panes. Sarah paused, waiting for the echoing rumble to dissipate. She began the next sentence. The princess looked at the peas and, when the world abruptly ceased its electrical functions. One moment they were bathed in the comforting glow of the reading lamp, and Barnaby, the nightlight. The next, the room was submerged in an absolute, suffocating blackness. It was a darkness so complete, so sudden, that it stole the very air from the room. Lily gasped. Sarah, who was sitting right beside the bed, felt the sudden, frantic tension in Lily's small body. The rhythmic peace of the night vanished, replaced by the heavy silence and the growing thrum of fear. "Mommy?" Lily's voice was a high, strained whisper, trembling on the edge of tears. "Mommy, where did Barnaby go? I can't see anything. The dark came in." Sarah's heart gave a sympathetic lurch. Her first instinct was the common parental panic. Find a flashlight, grab a candle, restore the normal order. But in that instant, surrounded by the oppressive blackness, Sarah knew that fumbling around for a source of light would only amplify Lily's distress, confirming that the situation was indeed dangerous. She had to become the anchor, instantly. She gently tightened her hold on Lily's hand, rubbing the back of it with her thumb, a quiet, repetitive motion designed to soothe. "Shh, my brave girl. It's okay. It's just the storm telling us it's tired and needs to rest," Sarah murmured, leaning closer until Lily could feel the warm breath near her ear. She let the silence hold for a moment, allowing Lily to absorb the calm vibration of her voice before speaking the essential truth she knew she had to impart. "Lily, listen closely to what Mommy is going to tell you," she continued, speaking with the measured pace of someone delivering a profound secret. "Even when the power goes out and the light disappears, There is one thing that never, ever leaves us. Lily sniffled, her breathing still choppy, waiting in the terrifying stillness. Love, Sarah said, the word resonating softly in the dark. Love never disappears. It doesn't need electricity or batteries or even a mushroom shape on the table. It is always here, surrounding us, holding us. She felt Lily relax marginally, a small easing of the grip. But Sarah knew a 6-year-old needed more than abstract reassurance. She needed a story that could conquer the dark, not with beams of light, but with courage. "Let's forget about the princess and the peas for tonight," Sarah whispered, pulling the heavy quilt higher around Lily's shoulders. "Tonight, we are going to tell a story about a little girl who learned how to make her own light." She settled back against the headboard, repositioning her voice to be the sole focus in the absolute dark. The silence of the power outage had gifted them a unique intimacy, forcing them closer. "Once upon a time," Sarah began, letting the traditional opening set the stage, "there lived a girl named Alara. She lived with her mother in a tiny, cheerful cottage right at the edge of the Whispering Woods. Alara was a very smart girl, but just like you, she hated when the sun went down. She was afraid of the thick, heavy shadows that moved when you weren't looking." Lily squeezed her mother's hand again, a silent signal that she understood Alara perfectly. The Whispering Woods were vast and ancient, and the only thing that kept the village safe and sound was the massive lighthouse that stood on the highest hill overlooking their town. That lighthouse, it had the strongest light in the entire kingdom. When the fog rolled in, or when the moon hid behind the clouds, the lighthouse keeper would light the lamp, and the light would sweep across the land, assuring everyone that they were safe, that they were known, and that they were protected. Sarah deepened her voice slightly, painting the scene clearly for Lily, whose eyes were now adjusting slightly, perhaps seeing the faint outline of her mother's silhouette against the window. Alara loved the lighthouse light. When she was scared, she would look out her window and see the powerful beam cutting through the night, and she would immediately feel better. It was her external nightlight, her great big Barnaby. But one evening, a storm came that was fiercer than any the village had seen in 100 years. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, and the rain fell so hard it sounded like millions of tiny feet dancing on the roof. And then, the worst thing happened. The entire town went dark. The power had been knocked out by a massive, ancient oak tree that had fallen on the lines. Lily's breath hitched again. "Just like now, Mommy?" "Just like now," Sarah confirmed gently. But the darkness wasn't the worst part this time. The worst part was that when Alara looked up at the highest hill where the great, strong lighthouse stood, she saw nothing. The main light was out. The emergency backups had failed, and the lighthouse keeper, who was very old and frail, was stuck up there, all alone. Sarah paused for dramatic effect, letting the story's tension fill the quiet void of the bedroom. The only sound was the distant drumming of rain. Now, the adults in the village panicked. They rushed around, trying to light oil lamps, but the oil was running low, and the wind kept snuffing them out. They were all too scared of the storm and the woods to go up the hill to help the keeper restart the light. They needed someone small, someone swift, someone who could sneak through the wind without being blown over. They needed Alara. Alara's mother knelt down and wrapped her cloak tightly around her daughter. "You must go, Alara," her mother said, her eyes shining with certainty, even in the faint light of a flickering candle. "You are the only one small enough to make it quickly, and you know the path better than anyone. But you must be brave. The path through the woods is going to be completely dark tonight. There will be no light to guide you." Ilara felt a cold knot of fear settle right in her stomach. She looked at the pitch-black woods looming beyond her cottage door. She started to shake her head. "I can't, Mama. I can't. What if I get lost? What if the shadows grab me? I won't know which way to go without the light." Ilara's mother took her face in her hands, just as Sarah was now carefully cupping Lily's cheek in the darkness. "Listen to me, Ilara," her mother said. "Your job is not to see the light. Your job is to be the light. And when you feel afraid, when you feel lost, you must remember that the greatest light you have is the one you already carry with you." Sarah paused, letting the statement hang in the air. She used this pause to stroke Lily's hair, gently smoothing it back from her forehead. Ilara didn't understand. How could she carry a light? She didn't have a lantern or a matchstick, but she knew she had to go. So she stepped out into the pouring rain and started walking toward the towering, silent hill. Sarah's voice dropped lower now, becoming the sound of the wind and the rain, increasing the sensory depth of the narrative. The whispering woods lived up to their name that night. Every tree seemed to be rustling with secrets. The mud was thick, pulling at her boots. She walked for what felt like hours, relying only on the feel of the rough path beneath her feet. Soon the path became winding and unclear. The darkness pressed in on her so tightly she felt like she couldn't breathe. She stumbled, falling to her knees in the wet dirt. Tears began to mix with the rain on her face. She was lost. She couldn't see the lighthouse, she couldn't see the path, and her fear became a terrible, cold wave washing over her. She knew she had to turn back, but she couldn't even tell which direction was back. She sank against the trunk of an ancient oak, sobbing silently, consumed by the darkness. It was in that moment, when she felt the most utterly alone, that she heard it. Not a sound from the storm, not the rustling of the leaves, but a distant, clear, beautiful sound. It was a tune, a familiar song. It was the lullaby her mother always sang when tucking her into bed. Sarah began to hum a very soft, recognizable lullaby, one that she always sang to Lily. It was a simple melody, ancient and comforting. The sound was just loud enough to cut through the quiet of the dark room. She couldn't hear the words, not over the wind, but she knew the rhythm, the cadence, the rise and fall of the melody. And suddenly, Ilara realized that the lullaby wasn't just a song. It was a memory of love, the memory of her mother's hands, her mother's smile, her mother's unshakable assurance. The sound was coming from the direction of home, but more importantly, it was echoing from inside her own heart. Ilara slowly stood up. She took a deep breath, she closed her eyes tight, and she focused entirely on the feeling of that memory, that love song. She started walking again, not guided by her eyes, which saw nothing, but guided by her ears and the deep, warm knowing in her chest. She followed the voice, the memory of her mother's promise, which felt like an internal glow, a steady lantern that the wind couldn't extinguish. The forest was still dark, but it was no longer menacing. It was just a place she had to walk through. Her fear hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had shrunk, overpowered by the focused intensity of her love for her mother and the powerful, steady reassurance of that song. Step by step, she followed the guidance of the lullaby, and then, finally, through the rain, she saw a faint, dark shape looming above her. She had reached the lighthouse. She was soaking wet and trembling with cold, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She scrambled up the narrow, winding stairs until she found the old keeper huddled in the lamp room, trying desperately to fix the wiring with shaky hands. "I'm here," Ilara whispered, pushing her soaking hair out of her eyes. The old man looked up, astonished to see the small child. Alara didn't hesitate. She repeated the steps her mother had taught her for lighting the oil lamp at home, only this time it was a gigantic lighthouse lamp. With a great hiss and a careful, steady hand, Alara managed to turn the key and coax the massive lamp back to life. And in that instant, the world changed again. A single, magnificent, sweeping beam of light shot out across the black forest, across the stormy sea, and over her little town. The light pierced the rain, and every person in the village knew that they were safe. Alara had saved them, not because she was strong, but because when her external light failed, she had found the courage to listen to the true light, the one her mother had given her. Alara stood there, watching the beam swing back and forth, illuminating the storm. But even though the lighthouse was working, she knew the deepest, truest light was the one she had discovered on the dark path, the light of her mother's love and her own bravery. Sarah's voice softened and slowed. The humming of the lullaby faded to a whisper. In the total darkness of the bedroom, the story had done its work. Lily, held safely by the hand, had absorbed the warmth of the narrative. Her earlier frantic breathing had eased into the slow, steady rhythm of sleep. Her hand, which had been clutching Sarah so tightly, was now merely resting in her mother's grasp. Sarah didn't move. She listened to the rain outside, which had mellowed into a persistent, gentle drizzle. She could hear Lily's quiet, peaceful breaths. Sarah sat there in the velvety dark, reflecting on how true the story was. As adults, we forget that our voice, our presence, is the fundamental assurance for our children. It doesn't matter how many flashlights or emergency generators we buy. The real comfort is the human connection. She thought about how often she rushed through bedtime, eager to reclaim her own time, forgetting that these quiet moments in the dark were the workshops where emotional resilience was forged. She sat for what felt like hours, enveloped in the quiet intimacy only a power outage can provide. The entire world outside was on pause. There was no phone screen glowing, no television humming in the background, just the sound of two hearts beating in sync. She finally slipped her hand free when she was absolutely certain Lily was deep asleep, and she carefully leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her daughter's forehead. The house remained dark through the rest of the night. Sarah eventually fell asleep in the chair beside the bed, wrapped in the knowledge that her daughter was safe, even without Barnaby. Then, just as the storm clouds were finally beginning to thin, a glorious, slow-motion event occurred. The sun rose. The first rays of dawn were tentative, silvery light creeping through the window and slowly revealing the familiar contours of the room. The shadows melted away, replaced by the soft, golden light of morning. Lily stirred and opened her eyes. For a moment, she seemed confused, seeing her mother curled in the chair and the room flooded with natural light. She stretched, yawned, and then remembered the intense, scary blackness of the night. She turned to Sarah, who was just blinking awake. "Mommy," Lily said, her voice clear and morning bright. "The light came back." Sarah smiled, stiffly pushing herself up from the chair. "It did, sweetie. The sun always keeps its promises." Lily didn't rush to switch on the mushroom nightlight, Barnaby, which remained stubbornly dark due to the lingering power outage. Instead, she looked up at Sarah, her small face radiant, and a profound realization dawned in her eyes. It was the moment the fictional story of Alara translated into her 6-year-old reality. "Mom," she said, reaching out to touch her mother's pajama sleeve. "You know that light Alara found? The one that didn't need a plug?" "Yes, honey," Sarah confirmed. Lily's smile grew wide and absolutely certain, conquering every remnant of the night's fear. "You're my nightlight," she declared. Even when the darkness came, you were right here. You were my light. And in that simple, sincere declaration, Sarah understood the true weight of her promise from the night before. Love wasn't just a feeling. It was a consistent, reliable source of illumination. It was the steady beam that guided a small girl through the unknown fear of the dark. It is so easy in our frantic, bright world to rely on the external sources of safety, the perfect alarm system, the brightest lights, the loudest siren. But the truth is, the deepest comfort, the hope that truly reassures us, comes from the unbreakable bond of family love. It comes from the unwavering, gentle presence that tells us, I am here, you are safe, you are loved. And that voice, that consistent source of comfort, that's the greatest light we can ever provide for our children, especially when the world goes completely dark. It's the promise that even when the electricity fails, the human heart never will. If this story reminds you of a moment when you felt someone's love guiding you through a tough time, maybe when you felt truly lost or afraid, share that memory in the comments below. Let us know who your nightlight is, because sometimes just knowing that we are not alone in the dark is the most powerful beam of light there is. We all need that reassurance, that simple knowledge that love never disappears. Thank you for listening.